I'm inside Parliament House, the courtyard. My lobbyist pass, in fact, still works. I'm lobbying for the Punters, and I've caught up with Senator David Pocock because he is one of very few politicians actually talking about gas in the way that it needs to be spoken about. Politician David Pocock, why is it that no one's talking about the biggest scam in Australian history, which is we're giving away our gas for free, getting nothing for it? Let's start with why are politicians not talking about this issue? We've got billboards all around the country trying to get them to talk about this, showing that punters care about this, they put their own money behind billboards. Why are they not talking about it? And you and a few others are talking about it.
Because there's been such strong bipartisan support for the gas export industry for a long time now, and neither of the major parties have really questioned essentially just giving away our gas for free to be exported. We're finally having the conversation around Australian gas for Australian manufacturers, businesses and households first. Basically, as soon as we expose ourselves to the export market, supply and demand doesn't work anymore. And so we've seen the prices we're paying for our own gas go through the roof.
Because we're competing with overseas
buyers. And those overseas buyers are often entering into long-term contracts, whereas some of our manufacturers and businesses don't necessarily have that long-term certainty to put in a long-term offer for gas.
Because that's the other half that no one talks about, is we have manufacturing here, we have businesses here that need quote-unquote cheap energy, and gas is one of the most expensive inputs into it. And no one's talking about the industries that rely on cheap energy and predictability of that pricing. Like, no one's even talking about that. Like, you would think other businesses would be on the punter side as well because they're also getting ripped.
A couple of weeks ago now, I stood up with a whole bunch of stakeholders. You know, the peak fertilizer industry, they still use gas. Manufacturing union, Senator Jackie Lambie, the Australian Council of Social Services, saying we should have Australian gas for Australians first and foremost. And we keep hearing about this, potential gas shortfall on the East Coast, despite us being, the first or second biggest gas exporter in the world. My solution has been tell the gas companies your uncontracted gas, so gas that you haven't already sold overseas, needs to be offered to Australians first before you can export it. And there's 10 times more uncontracted gas in the system than our projected shortfall in 2030.
So that's gas just sitting there that hasn't been sold yet. But they're waiting to either sell it to another overseas buyer or then sell it back to us at some nice high price.
Yeah. So it will be sold.
Is it almost like land banking, just gas banking, just banking your own gas on supply side and waiting for the highest bidder?
Yeah, I guess that's how the market works. You have some long-term contracts to supply gas. I know some of those contracts, they're supplying gas at $4 a gigajoule.
Yeah.
And some Australian businesses are paying $20 a gigajoule. And so there's this huge disparity. So
we're just giving it to Japan.
So there's two parts to this, right? One is a political failure to not have a reservation policy.
Yep.
Like happens in WA. 15% of gas needs to be offered to Australians. That brings down the price because we don't actually need that much gas, and that is supply and demand. Then on our exports, and this is the part of the conversation that's not being had at this election, is why are we giving it away for free?
Yes.
We're looking at the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, $2.82 trillion as of this morning. And, this thing's just ticking up all the time.
Yeah. So when they run out of oil, they've got $3 trillion. When we run out of gas, what the bloody hell do we have?
Well, we've got $1 trillion national debt.
Oh, cool. Don't worry, students will pay for that. Taxpayers will pay for that.
My frustration is that every budget we hear the government of the day say, we can't afford to look after a whole bunch of Aussies who are battling. We can't afford to raise things like job seeker, where we have a social security system where people are literally living in poverty.
Yeah.
That's a political decision.
Yeah.
To have people who are unemployed below the poverty line. We can't afford it, apparently.
Yeah.
Yet we're giving away a finite resource that belongs to all of us. This is all of our gas, and these companies are just milking the system.
So let's talk about campaign mode. Politicians now, you're one of them, you're looking at what the political parties are putting up in the way of gas policy. Let's break down what the Liberal Party have announced, because they seem to be talking a lot about gas right now. They seem to have pivoted from nuclear. Now all they want to do is talk about gas. What's your take on what they're offering and whether it's coming close to talking about the actual problem?
Really interesting. When, 18 months ago, Matt Keane, a former New South Wales Liberal, came out and said nuclear is just a fig leaf for gas. And obviously the federal Libs slammed him, said that's not true. In Peter Dutton's budget reply speech, he mentioned gas 19 times and he mentioned nuclear once. And so clearly,
kind of looks like a fig leaf.
There is a lot of emphasis on gas.
A small fig leaf.
And I guess as an independent, I'm going to back in good policy. I genuinely think it's a good thing that Peter Dutton is talking about some sort of reservation policy.
Okay, so he's talking about something that could help. So
yes, he's saying let's actually make sure that Australian gas benefits Australians first and foremost in terms of supply.
That sounds good, doesn't it?
Which will bring down the price.
Yeah.
Yes, there's questions about how he's going to do that
and whether we trust him
why
to do it.
Why the Libs didn't do that in the last decade that they've been in government.
Yeah,
but that's a good thing.
Yeah.
The other side of it though is he's saying we're just going to put our foot down when it comes to approval of gas.
Because he was saying he's just going to immediately open some project.
Northwest Shelf in WA. Yeah.
Right.
90 million tonnes of emissions a year. We'll go out to 2070. That's not what we should be using our gas for. The penny has finally dropped that we actually have more than enough gas here in Australia.
Yeah.
Like we don't have a gas supply problem. We have a gas export problem.
Because they're treating us a bit like idiots. When the Liberal Party stand up and say, a little bit, they've kind of taken, I think after your press conference, they kind of stole your line. Okay, we want to give gas to Australians first, but then they're saying, but we need more supply. But then when you look at the numbers, you flip one page, you see 80% is exported. So they want to jack up supply to obviously export more. At this point, I am wondering, how stupid do they think we are?
Well, I think it's concerning on a few fronts. One, we're not getting much from gas exports. Petroleum resource rent tax, which is the thing that's meant to get money from offshore gas, because states can't put royalties on offshore extraction.
Yeah.
And so the feds came up with the petroleum resource rent tax. To date, not a single cent from offshore LNG. And they're exporting hundreds of billions of dollars of gas.
So this has got to be a policy written by the gas lobbyists, because the people they benefit, that this definitely benefits the most, is gas corporations.
It clearly does. It was written for the oil industry before offshore LNG became a big thing. And the rules have basically been tweaked a bit to make it so that gas projects essentially never pay any effectively royalty. The other thing which got a head in the sand about is climate change. Opening up new gas reserves is totally incompatible with even keeping warming below 2 degrees. And if you think about 2 degrees, what that means for Australia, that's the Great Barrier Reef's gone. Ningaloo's gone. We're going to look back at 2019 and be like, well, that was actually a pretty cool year, by 2040, 2050. There's a lot at stake here. And at a time where we're seeing insurance premiums go through the roof, cost of living pressures are being made worse by a climate that's breaking down, we should be getting some revenue from our existing gas exports to actually prepare ourselves for what's coming. Spend a lot more on climate adaptation in communities across the country, regional communities particularly.
Because I think that's the rubber hitting the road of climate change is such an abstract concept that it's hard to attach a tangible cause and effect directly to. But at the end of the day, if costs of insurance is going up, costs of adaptation, costs of more flooding, costs of moving houses, costs of fire maintenance, costs of more firefighters, costs of getting our own choppers because now LA is having fires in the wintertime when we would be using their choppers. We're the ones footing the bill again for that. And I think that's the general theme that runs through a lot of this. I think this policy is so potent to punters, and we keep coming back to it because it's just kind of the exact pattern that keeps on happening with every issue, meaning a bill is written that doesn't have everyday voters in mind and the regular Aussie punter. And when we look down the line, we're the ones holding the bag every single time. So let's go to the government now. Has the government offered anything? Has Albo offered anything in the way of kind of addressing this problem, talking about this problem? Well, give me some good points and then some bad points.
Good points are that they do have a mechanism to deal with gas supply.
Is it working?
No, it's not, because it seems like they've exempted a whole bunch of projects. We don't know how many because it's commercial in confidence, but they've essentially said, these are the rules, you can get an exemption, and they've given a whole bunch of projects exemptions, so that hasn't necessarily dealt with supply and demand here in Australia.
So they get to stand up. So when we see Albo going, no, we put in a price cap, we've done this, look at what we've done, the fine print has been redacted. It doesn't seem to be working because energy is still kind of high. What you're saying is because they've done deals that have exempted certain things and we can't see those deals.
Yeah, they're commercial in confidence. And, it's fairly standard for government to say we can't reveal how we're dealing with individual companies because that could prejudice our negotiations with other companies. So on the one hand, you can kind of get what they're saying, but it's clearly not.
But when we're getting a bad deal,
it's not working. And so we need a better mechanism. And really worryingly, Labor is also saying, well, the way to deal with this is for more gas.
Oh, so they're also saying
They're
the more
also
gas
saying we need
thing.
more gas.
And so as soon as someone says more gas, this is, I think, what I've nailed it down to. As soon as someone says we need more gas, that is a lobbyist talking point. Because the only person that quote unquote more gas benefits are the people exporting it. Because we're not even getting a cut of those exports.
One of the things that I've been trying to dig into at Senate estimates is one of the reasons the Labor government says that we need more gas is to supply countries like Japan, who currently use our gas to create electricity, and they don't have the renewable resources we have. And Japan's been saying we need more gas. It turns out, though, that now Japan is exporting more gas than we send them.
So we give them gas and they go, what a great deal.
Let's
on
some
sell.
money.
They've become a middleman.
They have. And so now they are this gas hub, essentially, where we're sending them gas. And, in many cases, far cheaper than Australians can buy that same gas. They then use it, but then they export it into Asia. And are creating like this sort of dependence on their gas because they're then using their big companies that develop all the infrastructure for gas use, and they're selling it to those countries.
Yeah.
So we're totally being conned. We pay for this in so many ways. One, we don't get any money for our gas.
Yeah.
Two, we're making climate change worse by not actually acting as one of the biggest fossil fuel exporters.
And we pay for that.
And as scientists will tell you, we're the developed country that probably has the most to lose because we do have so much land that is incredibly marginal. People say, we're the land of drought and flood. Fire. All these things have become so much worse. So why wouldn't be saying, hey guys, we've got more than enough gas for the transition. Let's crack on with this transition, get money for the things we are exporting and invest it into industries of the future that aren't just digging up and shipping stuff off and potentially not even clipping the ticket as it leaves the country.
Coincidence or corruption just seems to be the name of this game, because regular Aussie punters would look at everything you've described and they would use the word corruption. I know it's legal. I know it's allowed. I know the commercial in confidence. I know the whole sovereign risk thing. We can't change the deals because they won't invest here.
And this is what all the companies said to Norway. There's a really interesting book called $1 Trillion Baby, which documents what happened in Norway, where they found big reserves of oil, and the parliament was grappling with how do we set up this industry and how do we ensure that Norwegians actually benefit. And the gas companies basically said, well, if you do tax us, we'll go elsewhere.
Yeah.
And thankfully, both their major parties said, well, this is our oil, our gas. It's for our future. Go somewhere else. And then it was like a day later, they came back and they're like, well, actually, we will invest.
Because is the conversation like, hey, Inpex, what'd you make in a couple years, 5 or 4 years or whatever? You made your income was 40 billion, right? They never show us their books properly. Yeah. We don't know what their profit's turning because they somehow don't make profit for some reason. But that's turning over $40 billion. The conversation, I think, once again, they take us punters for idiots because the conversation's got to be, we're going to tax you like a ton, like Norway. We're not even going to go for, let's say, we'll go the ideal. We're going to tax you at 78%. We're going to copy Norway. We're going to be co-investors. Do you want $2 billion?
They're still making a profit, right? They're still making a profit.
The conversation is like, do you want $2 billion? You can't have 40 billion anymore. Do you want $2 billion? And the answer to that is obviously yes. $2 billion is still a lot of money. Not saying that's the exact number, but money's money. And people will be there to co-invest and have that conversation.
I don't understand why we're willing to just accept this from our major parties. I was up in Darwin for a Senate committee hearing, and we were out on the harbour and hearing from these fishermen who are talking about the impact that the gas export terminals are having on the harbour. Like reduced catch, dolphin populations down by 50%. Like they're finding metals in some of the crabs and all the rest. And there were a couple of people from the NT government, and I said to them, what's the benefit to the NT government from having Impex here?
That's the question.
And they were like really sheepish, and they were like, well, we get payroll tax. It's like, payroll tax? That's all you get? They're like, no, but federal government gets petroleum resource rent tax. I was like, no, we don't. We don't even get that.
I'm in the federal government.
So what are we doing?
Yes.
We're essentially sacrificing what I think is incredibly valuable in our natural environment in some cases, and this is a finite resource, and we're happy just to give it away. But I think people are waking up to it, and it's no surprise that time and time again, I've seen in the Senate, I'm new to this, it's been a steep learning curve, a real eye-opener. The number of times where you have, just in this chamber here, basically the whole crossbench pushing for lobbying past reform or ministerial diaries to be released so we can see who you're meeting with before you make these laws.
Yeah.
And Labor, the Libs, and the Nats will vote against the whole crossbench and say, no, we don't want lobbying reform. We don't want to have to release ministerial diaries. We don't want to get more for our gas. We're happy to keep giving it away.
And they vote together on it.
They vote together.
And I think this is the really cynical thing that you've just pointed out as to why punters give up on politics, detach from politics, is because it's almost a show, their disagreement. It's a front that they put on. Oh, we're the opposition. We disagree with you. We disagree with you. But then for major reform, that when we have these conversations and we go, why? We'll play the blame game in a minute. And we come back to these systemic structures around lobbying, access, non-transparency. These are the things.
The revolving door of, ministers then going to work in the resource sector or staffers going to work for gambling companies. Like it's non-stop.
Yes. You guys look at that, Aussie punters look at that and go, okay, that's surely a step in the right direction. And then we see the most amazing amount of unity between the people that apparently oppose each other so much. And I think we're getting tired of the theatrics and the beauty pageant politics of pretend disagreement over marginal fringe issues that just don't matter when clearly something is broken with how these rules are made. But that's the one thing that they will defend. So let's go then to the blame game. Play the blame game with me. You sit here, you see what's going on. Where do you assign blame? It could be for the gas issue. We can start there. Who's to blame? If you could point at one thing and go, Aussie punters, this is the thing. Like there's lots of things, but this is the one thing that I want to point my finger at and I want to blame as to why we are getting absolutely ripped. And it's not just gas. It's like gambling. They agree on, Labor wrote the bloody law themselves. And we don't have it.
Yeah.
Why? And then you look at gambling donations through the roof. They go to work for blah, 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 the same thing. So play the blame game with me.
Well, I'm an independent. So what I've seen, the blame is firmly at the feet of the major parties. Time and time again, they will vote in either their self-interest or in the interest of vested interests. I think it's more complicated, more nuanced than just, these are political donors. Yes, there's donations. There's also this revolving door. There's this, jobs for politicians after politics, jobs for staffers. Yeah. But then there's also these industries who carry a very big stick, working on the inside, getting great access to the minister, and then saying, if you don't give us what you want. Remember when you tried to put a super profits tax on the mining industry? We came out, we put millions of dollars into a campaign, and we basically brought your government down. And I think that is one of the things that you see time and time again, is a powerful industry that is not afraid to use its power, and actually, essentially, they probably don't even have to threaten. They just say,
implicit.
We need this,
and that's what makes it hard because it's not said, but we're just connecting the dots.
Yeah.
So, are you putting the blame at the feet of politicians who value power and staying in power over good policy? Because that's what it looks like. It looks like all of these things. They don't want to go against these groups because they might lose power.
Yeah, but I mean, as an elected representative, you're here to represent people, not corporations, not multinationals who somehow get our gas for free, export it, make a ton of money, and then minimize their tax to basically nothing. I'm not here to represent them.
Yeah.
I'm here to represent Australians, people who, I'm a senator for the ACT. It's in my job title.
Yeah.
And my frustration is that we're not actually putting Australians first.
And you have to...
We hear a lot of rhetoric from the major parties about looking after Aussies and all the rest.
Yeah, they say the right thing.
But when it comes to our laws, it seems like, all these multinationals have a pretty sweet ride, whereas, Aussie punter tries to not pay tax.
You're in jail.
Yeah.
And we're always told we can't afford things, but we can afford to allow 1 in 3 corporations to just skip out on tax to profit shift. The ATO has documents saying, they're at risk of offshoring profits, so it looks like that they're not making a profit here and not paying taxes. And we just can allow that to keep on happening rather than doing something hard to change that. And we're always told we can't afford the things we need. What do we do? Because there is a propaganda machine from the corporates, that big stick you're talking about, that will whack politicians that get too close to their profits. Oh, you change that rule, that'll hurt us. Because obviously we're talking about changing the laws that would see an industry cleaning absolutely billions, right? I would say stealing from the Aussie punter with their resources to going to being just a regular profitable corporation, but not like a mega behemoth. So they've got their stick and they're whacking it, and they'll use the propaganda machine to go against anyone. You're saying some dangerous things against this industry because you're costing them profits. So you're going up against that machine. In this election, what do Aussie punters do in the upcoming election to push politicians to do what's for their best interest and not for the corporation that has that big stick.
Find a local candidate who's going to do that. And we're seeing independents and minor parties starting to run across the country. And you can actually have someone who's accountable to you. As a community-backed independent, my commitment is to be accessible and ultimately accountable to people in the AC. I vote on their behalf. I'm very aware of that. And so I go out of my way to get out, talk to people, understand what they want. And when it comes to this issue, pretty clear, Australians want to return on our resources. It's no surprise. Like, we're starting to see some fear-mongering. Oh, minority government would be terrible.
Yes, we are.
I saw an article the other day in one of the big papers that was basically quoting at length two gas executives saying more independence, a minority government would be terrible for the country. No wonder.
Yes.
Because independents are saying, hey,
we're going to tax your
system's
ass.
not working.
Yeah.
Let's have something that is actually fair. Fair for all of us. We can't just allow this free ride to continue. So I'd say vote independent. And if you don't, give them a crack. If you don't like them, 3 years later, you can get rid of them. Because the one language that these politicians do understand,
you can boot them out,
is at the ballot box.
So you're saying, so let's give your pitch to the punters. We're in the elevator. There's one here. There's only 2 floors. I hit the 2nd floor. Pitch to the punters.
It's a quick elevator.
Why they should vote, I suppose, as you're saying it, independent.
Independents are there to represent their community. And when you have independents from across the country actually listening to their community, you're going to get better outcomes. You actually debate legislation. You know what you're voting on. 90% of the stuff we vote on in the Senate, the major party senators have no idea what they're even voting on.
Just walking.
Because you're just told how to vote, right?
You just vote
whatever
for the
party wants.
Right.
Not what is good for my state or territory, what's good for my electorate. And I think we'd finally start to see some of the root causes being dealt with when it comes, to housing and health and the export of our resources. Like, let's stop with all these band-aids and say, how do we start to deal with these things
systemically?
Yeah.
Final question. Lots of independents are out there. Hard to tell the difference between all of them. What are your tips for, you're saying vote independent. What are we looking for in an independent that is going to represent the punters? Because anyone can just say they're independent.
Firstly, looking for some sort of community process that they've been through. And there's community groups across the country that have essentially formed a committee and said, we want an independent candidate, and then really put a bunch of people through the ringer and said, like, are you good? What do you think about this? How are you going to represent us? And then endorsed a candidate. I think that's a first step, but then get to know them, right? I say this to young people all the time. You can get cynical, check out and say, all politicians are a bunch of crooks. Doesn't matter how you vote. Nothing's going to change. Or you can say, we actually have an amazing democracy here in Australia. Like, turn on the TV and look what's happening in the US. Our vote matters and we can actually change things. So find out what they think. Go to one of their events.
What if
ask
punters,
some questions?
What if they don't have a community-backed independent in their electorate? What do punters do to send the message to the major parties that what they're doing just isn't good enough?
Find a minor party. There'll be minor parties running. Or run yourself. Get together. It can be done. Like, it's the only way we're going to change it is by having more and more people on the crossbench that are holding the major parties to account, saying, you got to put Australians first.
Politician David Pocock, thanks for chatting to the Punters on the Punters Politics Podcast.
Cheers, Punter Conrad. Cheers.